What's good, YouTube? We're talking college sports in the Deep South where college football is king, and on the plains of Auburn, the battle cry is War Eagle. Kennard Vernon Stewart once again for Vernon Speak Sports Auburn. We're on the podcast tonight. We're doing the first episode of the opponent previews for the Auburn Tigers coming into 2019. Now, I neglected to include Oregon in this particular group because I have an ongoing series with Oregon already where we talk about positions, we talk about different breaking news stories that go on with Auburn and Oregon leading up to the Advocare Classic, which will be taking place in just a couple of months. So we're way closer to that thing than a lot of you would care to imagine, about 2 months away. Let's go ahead and get the comment section active here in the podcast tonight. The Fearless and True Gang get it very active. Here on Vernon Speak Sports Auburn, it's always great to be an Auburn Tiger. War Eagle. 2019 brings a interesting set of opportunities for the Auburn Tigers to get themselves back into the relevancy of the SEC and college football in general. They'll be playing under the lights on ESPN2 against the Tulane Greenwave. As a matter of fact, if you want to talk about history, Tulane and Auburn have a deep history that dates all the way back to the 20s when they were former Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Association members of the Southern Conference, and also, oddly enough, Tulane is a former member of the SEC, winning championships in 1934, 39, and 1944. They actually have more championships than some of the current members of the SEC. Off the top of my head, I know South Carolina and Vanderbilt, maybe even Kentucky, and a couple others. The Auburn and Tulane series that game was played majority in New Orleans, Montgomery, and Mobile, with the last two meetings, of course, dating back to 1955, were played in Auburn. The last meeting was in 2006, with Auburn winning that game 38-13. Strangely enough, Tulane actually leads the series over Auburn 17-14 and 1. What do we know about the current Tulane Greenwave? Well, 7-6 last year record. They beat Memphis, Kenny Dillingham's former team. They pushed Power 5 Wake Forest into overtime. And they have a little bit of talent returning, guys. Darnell Mooney, 48 receptions for 993 yards and 8 touchdowns. He averaged 24.7 yards per catch. One of the guys you want to definitely look for coming into this game is Jonathan McMillan, 6'3", 210, graduate senior. Was a transfer from LSU, very talented, helped kind of turn some things around for Tulane last year. 51.3 completion percentage and 1,304 yards and 10 touchdowns. So these guys can actually move the ball. When you look at their average points per game as well, you can see where the 7-6 record lies, because they were almost dead even in points allowed and points scored. You're talking about like a less than 2 point differential. They're a very interesting football team for the Tulane Greenwave. Another thing that's really worth noting is the fact that Tulane actually statistically in some key areas were one of the better defenses in the country, especially when you talk about sacks. The Greenwave ranked 8th in the nation with 3.15 sacks per game. Now, this is where things get a little interesting. Now, we do remember that Auburn had a little bit of trouble last year along the offensive line, especially there in the interior, most notably Caleb Kim at center, who struggled at times mightily with physicality in the middle of the football field. This game, of course, the Oregon game is going to be important, but as you continue down the stretch, this game is going to be particularly important because news sources, Bleacher Magazine, also Bleacher Report, also 24/7 Sports actually ranks Tulane Greenwave as one of the top 10 defensive lines in the country, and for good reason. They really, really know how to get pressure on the quarterback, and that's something that's going to be very important, especially as the offensive line, attempts to gel together. before getting into SEC play, already having played a Power 5 team in Oregon. So we'll get a lot of information from that Oregon game. But just like one of my subscribers said in a video that I did a little while back, you're not going to get the full story in just one ball game. As a matter of fact, if we look at, say, the Washington game from last year, when you go back and look at the Washington game, the identity of Auburn in the Washington game versus the identity of Auburn, say, against LSU was totally different. And that's, you know, that won't be any further from the case in this particular situation. But one thing you got to do, though, you just got to take advantage of each ball game, getting yourselves settled, getting yourselves acclimated to what your team's identity is going to be going into the very, very important part of SEC play. Now, I coined Oregon as a game that Auburn must win. Technically speaking, they don't necessarily have to beat Oregon to have a successful season. Would be nice, but you want to build on each game you play leading up to SEC play, because, you know, Auburn is going to be looking at 2 home games against Tulane and Kent State. Both are going to be played under the lights at Jordan Hare Stadium. Then that's when it gets real. You're talking about a trip down to College Station to kick this thing off against Texas A&M, who the nation is pretty big on. Jimbo Fisher, obviously a former national championship coach, ironically winning that national championship while at Florida State over the 2013 Auburn Tigers with seconds remaining in that football game, has the Texas A&M Aggies, the 12th man, sky high with expectations going into this year and beyond, because especially when you look at the recruiting class that Jimbo Fisher has been able to put together down there. Then Auburn's talking about, you know, trips to Mississippi State coming to Auburn, then taking the trip down to Florida, and then awaiting, getting ready to play, got Arkansas in between that, then LSU and beyond. So when you look at a game like this as an early opportunity for the Auburn Tigers to play against a solid team. When you talk about talent, though, I think Auburn is the obvious, you know, favorite as far as talent goes. But you still can't overlook anybody, especially a team that's projected to have one of the best defensive lines in the country. Can't afford to do that. When you dissect this particular defense, you have Patrick Johnson, who plays what they call the joker position, which is synonymous to Auburn's buck linebacker position. And when this position, just like the buck linebacker at Auburn, when this joker position is played at a high level, then you get some high level results. You're talking about 10 sacks last year from Patrick Johnson. They also returned Cameron Sample, who has 4 sacks, DeAndre Williams, who has 2 sacks. So a very, very productive defense for the Tulane Greenwave will come into Auburn facing a senior offensive line who we feel will be much improved. Also, for the first time in many years, Gus Malzahn will be back calling plays. And you have a wealth of experience for Auburn. Well, not a wealth of experience, but you have some experience coming back for the Auburn Tigers at the running back position via Cam Martin, Boobie Whitlow, and a little bit of Sean Shivers. Also get a little recruiting help from DJ Williams and Mark Anthony Richards. We want to feel that Harold Joyner will be in the mix as well. Definitely a huge asset to the backfield for the Auburn Tigers. Also, what's going to be real challenging for the Tulane Greenwave is the secondary for Tulane having to, you know, really have to step their game up when you talk about an onslaught of receivers coming at you with led by Seth Williams, Andrew Schwartz, Zach Farrar, who is a transfer out of Youngstown State, Matthew Hill, Eli Stove. I mean, it's just kind of nerve-wracking just thinking about it. Will Hastings. You're talking about a lot of speed that's going to create a lot of imbalance for the Tulane Greenwave. Now, I think Tulane is going to have a relatively successful season in the American Athletic Conference, a conference that they've been a part of since 2014. They were also independent for many years, but now a part of the American Athletic Conference. They will probably be able to make a little bit of noise in the American Athletic Conference. But unfortunately, under the lights in Jordan Hare Stadium, I don't think Tulane is going to have much luck. Maybe a little spark in the first half. Auburn tends to play very well at night in Jordan Hare Stadium. So I don't predict a high level of success for the Tulane Greenwave coming into Jordan Hare Stadium in 2019. This is a renewal of one of the better rivalries in the SEC during the somewhat prehistoric stages of college football, back when they had the face maskless helmets. But nonetheless, a big part of college football legacy, Auburn versus Tulane, where Tulane leads the series 17-14 in one game. Majority played at New Orleans, Montgomery, Mobile. Last three matchups have been in Auburn. We look to see a relatively entertaining game, but a game probably majority dominated by Auburn. We look for at least a 3-touchdown win in this game. As we get close to the season, I will give and kind of see how things are turning out. We will give more of a closer breakdown as far as score goes around that time. But just, from the outside looking in, just thinking, no, this game won't be any closer than 3. Auburn up 3 touchdowns. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast. This is the first episode of the opponent previews for the Auburn Tigers. Look for some fireworks in Jordan Hare Stadium when Tulane comes to town. Tulane, just to recap, one of the better defensive lines in college football. They're projected as one of the top 10, actually number 10 in the country, led by Patrick Johnson with 10 sacks on last season. Plays the joker position, similar to the Buck for Auburn. So we will look out for that. That's going to be a place of notation, is the Tulane defense. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart for Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. Go ahead and like this video, subscribe to Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn, and don't forget to leave your comments in the comment section. Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn, where it's always great to be an Auburn Tiger War Eagle.